Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. I would like to call to order the special board meeting of the Othello School District Board of Directors. It is a board workshop pertinent to bond information. We will begin this morning with the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We want to welcome all of our guests that are joining us via Zoom today. Thank you for being with us. And I will turn this over to Superintendent Pete Perez to proceed. Technical difficulty, please stand by.
All right, thank you. Well, we appreciate the board taking some time out of their morning to come in and process and think about the bond that we're going to ask our community to consider. So we're excited to have Jim McNeil here. Certainly has a high level of expertise and experience in this area. And we're going to turn it over to him to share some information with the board about the appropriate steps and processes for launching this bond initiative. So we'll turn it over to Jim.
Great. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I just want to express my appreciation to Pete and also to Gina and the information they've provided me and their other staff. They've done a great job in giving us information. As you can tell by the draft resolution that you have before you, there's a lot of information, a lot of detail that we need in order to make sure we put it all together, and your team did a great job of gathering that information. So a little background on what we do specifically, and I think it will be helpful for you. I've represented Othello School District for many, many years as bond and special counsel. We draft all the district's bond documents as well as all the levy resolutions, et cetera, and advise the district on a variety of finance-related matters. With that background, our goal, or really our responsibility, is to make sure that we can draft documents so that ultimately we can render an opinion that your bonds are valid and that interest on the bonds is tax exempt. As you might remember, a municipal bond, one of the hallmarks of a municipal bond is that interest on that bond is tax exempt to the owner of that bond. And so particularly Washington School District bonds are highly sought after in the municipal market because they are in essence, triple secured. They have your full faith and credit, they have your unlimited taxing power, and they also are backed by the state of Washington. So Washington School District bonds are highly sought after, and part of our role as your bond counsel, bond attorney, is to make sure we can render an opinion with respect to that tax exempt nature of your bonds. So part of our process then is to make sure that any kind of bond election resolution is accurate and consistent with state law. And by way of background, in order for you to submit a ballot measure, whether it's a levy or bond, the board must adopt a resolution that submits that measure to the voters, and then make sure that resolution then gets filed by a deadline set by state law. Currently, if you were to adopt the resolution that you have before you on November 22nd, that would submit the measure to the voters on February 8th. And the filing deadline, the resolution filing deadline with the counties is December 10th. And so those are kind of the outside envelope of timing that you have to think about as we go through this process and as we review the terms of the resolution. So really the resolution itself submits the measure to the voters, and that kind of kickstarts everything for a vote to take place on February 8th. once the district files the resolution with the counties, and you'll be filing both with Adams County, Grant, and Franklin counties, because you're a joint district that crosses all those various counties. Those counties, and it's primarily Adams County, will undertake the jurisdiction of conducting the election, right? That's their role as lead county for Othello School District. So they'll make sure they send out notice, and they'll do all the things that they're supposed to do in order to make sure that the election is properly called. And they'll provide the appropriate information and notices to Grant and Franklin County as well. So that's the kind of mechanics. The other thing that's a bit odd this election cycle is the fact that school boards throughout the state have to appoint pro and con committee members, and that's part of the new requirements under state law that requires all elections being held after July 1 for those particular counties to publish a local voters pamphlet. So normally you would see a statewide local voters pamphlet or a voters pamphlet that has a list of candidates, etc. Well, that's now a requirement for every election. And so what that means for you and other school districts is that the board must actually formally appoint pro and con committee members after publishing notice. And so typically what you would do is you publish a notice on the website or in the local newspaper saying, hey, any interested persons who want to write or participate on a pro-con committee, please submit your name, and then the board will formally appoint those committee members at the November 22nd board meeting. The second thing that is required under the local voters pamphlet is that the district actually submit an explanatory statement that is supposed to be a description of what would happen should the measure be approved by the voters. And again, that's supposed to be a fair and objective statement, and it can be no more than 100 words because that's the word limit that Adams County has specifically for explanatory statements. We will also draft that on your behalf so that that gets appropriately filed with the county in a timely manner. That also has to be filed with the county by December 10th. So that's a little background, a lot of background actually on the election resolution. So I'm happy to take any questions from you before I jump into the actual terms of the resolution itself. So happy to entertain any kind of questions.
I have a quick question. What if we have no volunteers to be on our pro and con committee? Do we still have to do it, or we just have to invite people to be on a pro-con committee?
Correct. I mean, the only requirement for this board is just to appoint pro and con committee members. And so if no one shows up, then that con statement or that form that the district will complete will be blank. It might say something like, after published notice, no one came forward to participate on the committee. And that's really all that the board's responsibility is just to merely appoint people. If no one shows, then you've made an effort to find those persons, and that's all the counties want you to do is make a reasonable effort to find people. So typically, you would just make a note on that side of the form that no one came forward. So it's a bit of a strange requirement, quite frankly, and I think WASDA is and you may hear this at the annual conference this upcoming week, may have a session discussing this issue because it is a little bit of a strange requirement. I would note that as you are aware that you're not supposed to use public resources to promote or oppose a ballot measure, which would include your bond should you decide to run it in February. So it seems a little bit weird that you would have to appoint pro and con committee members then. So in any event, hopefully the law will get changed this cycle, this upcoming legislation session, but we shall see. So.
Would we have to go out for advertisement for this committee if we already have a committee that's already in place?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, normally what you would do is you would identify the individuals that you know are going to be on the pro committee, and you would list the top 3 people or a chair and their names, and then you still would need to go out and see if you have anybody that you know who might want to serve on the con committee. So it really is trying to make a reasonable effort. If you know of people, great, put them down. but you still should go through some type of notice process so that your community has an idea of what you're doing.
Okay, thank you. Because I was thinking of using the same committee that we had that presented this to us, because they've already went through the pros and cons of building this plan, I think, with us too.
Yeah. Just, Jim, if I could just provide a moment of clarity for the board about the process and where we're at, specifically to the pro and con requirement.
Okay.
We have posted on our website the minimum statement, right, about what the requirement. So the posting is out there. The opportunity to participate has been put forth. We're making a good faith effort. If names come in, we'll bring those to the board for consideration on the 22nd. I think apart from that, apart from the pro and con committee, would actually be a committee like the one who came together and thought about this that would help share the information about the bond with the community. I think it would even be separate from this pro and con group. So the group you're talking about, Ken, would very much be made of those folks who came and presented to the board. But the ball is rolling with the pro and con recruitment.
Right. Generally, the pro and con committee. I mean, it's two separate committees, right? So, in essence, your pro committee would be the levy yes committee, and so you'd identify those individuals that are serving on that committee. A lot of times, the facilities committee that made your recommendation kind of rolls into that vote yes committee, and that's typically how most of these committees are formed. So I hope that clarifies the information. Great. Well, let's jump into the resolution, and we can kind of give you some background on the terms of the resolution. Generally, we have a cover page, and part of the reason why we have a cover page listed is we include our name on it and also a heading so that the auditors know exactly, hey, this is a bond issue that's come before us, and also know that a nationally recognized bond counsel firm, our firm, have prepared the resolution. And that's important because a lot of times the counties hopefully give deference to our formulation of the ballot itself. So that's kind of why we do that cover page. The second page, even really starting in section 1, Section 1 really identifies the need that the district has and with respect to its facilities and the need to issue bonds in order to finance those various projects that will be identified later in the resolution. We always try to make sure that we include in Section 1A kind of the theme of the resolution or the bond, so that if we put language in the ballot that we'll discuss later, that the prosecutor who ultimately has to approve the ballot sees that there's a theme and that we're not just throwing words on a ballot that don't have any factual support behind them. So you'll see that, and you'll see this description in Section 1A, and I think I just highlight that we're talking about replacing and expanding school facilities in order to improve educational opportunities. And I think some of those are really key terms, and we'll see those terms identified in the ballot itself later when we go into that section of the resolution. Then Section 2 is really the foundation for how you use your bond proceeds and state match when you receive it. And we always will refer back to this formulation to make sure that we're being consistent with what the voters approve. And so we've tried to identify with specificity, yet being somewhat generic, so that we're providing maximum flexibility to you to kind of formulate the details of these projects, right? We don't want to, we try to be generic, but yet specific, so your voters have an understanding of what you're doing. And we're trying to use terms that will resonate with your voters. And so these are generated from the surveys that you've done and all the information that you've gathered from your community. Again, we're trying to hit the high points so that your community understands what you're doing with those proceeds. So that would be Section 2A, B, C, and D specifically. And those are the primary areas that we'll see later in the ballot formulation as well. Items E is kind of a generic phrase that we include to allow you some flexibility to make sure you can put all the equipment, everything you need in the projects above. And then incidental costs in item F, 2F, also allow you to pay for a variety of other services, right? I mean, this allows you to pay for engineering and architecture and administration and relocation costs and improvement costs, demolition, all those kinds of things that are incidental but necessary to your project. So, and then the final paragraph in section 2 I think is important because this paragraph really identifies the discretion that the board has in determining the real specifics of the projects. And so we'll kind of always go back to this as well to make sure that if there's something that we think you need to identify, or you want to do one project first as opposed to the other projects, this really provides the discretion, or at least acknowledges the discretion that the board has in setting forth the project and its order. Section 3 calls the election. It's a formal request for the district to request the Adams County Auditor to call the election and to conduct it on February 8th. Section 4 is a provision that once the bonds have been approved by the voters, this outlines some of the descriptions of how the bonds will be issued once the voters actually approve the measure. Section 5 we include as a federal for federal tax purposes. The IRS tax code says that if you're going to reimburse yourself from proceeds, that you include some type of declaration. And so how this would occur would be is, let's say that right now in the process you are working, you're doing some permitting, or you're moving some dirt around in anticipation that the voters are going to approve this measure, and you expend dollars from your general fund in order to do those improvements. This allows you to take bond proceeds that once the bonds are issued and then reimburse your general fund, and that's required. That type of formulation, or I guess the statement to reimburse yourself, is included generically here to be consistent with federal tax law. So this allows you to reimburse yourself for those types of expenditures. Section 6 identifies what happens if you have excess bond proceeds, and in essence says that you'll use those proceeds for other purposes after you go through a public hearing process. And then Section 7 identifies what you're going to utilize your state matching money for, or state financing assistance, when you get it. And again, any kind of state financing assistance you receive from the state will go to complete the projects. And if you have money left over after that from the state match, you can again utilize those for other purposes after you go through a public hearing process. And the district has used that process quite effectively previously on several projects. Section 8 indicates that you can also alter your expenditures. Should something happen, you want to cite one of the projects in a specific location and you need to move it or change a project substantially. This allows you to go through that alteration of expenditures process as long as you go through a public hearing. Section 9 is really the formulation of the actual ballot title. This is the actual ballot title that your voters will see. And Section 9, or the ballot, is really designed to try to provide a summary of the contents of Section 2A through E, right? So we're trying to synthesize all that information and do so in a pretty specific word limitation, right? So in the first sentence after the word concerning, starting with A, that can be no more than 10 words. And so, and you can see also that not only is there a word limit, but we've tried to identify that theme that we talked about earlier, right? Proposition to improve educational opportunities and relieve overcrowding. And so we're trying to carry that theme through the resolution. And so that if a prosecutor says, hey, how can you say relieve overcrowding? Tell me where that finding is, and then we can go back and say, well, the board made that specific finding in Section 1A. So again, we're trying to build this theme so that should anyone ask the question, we've got the support to make that argument, if you will. So then we go to the second paragraph or the second sentence in the ballot after the word would, and going all the way down to the reference of the resolution number, that could be no more than 75 words. And so, as you can tell, we're fairly limited to how much we can describe. And so a lot of what we're putting in here is fairly generic, yet enough specificity so your voters understand exactly what you're doing. So that's the formulation of the ballot itself and what your voters will see. And really, the ballot must describe the projects, indicate that you're going to issue bonds for those projects and a not to exceed number, i.e. the 51 million, and a maximum term of those bonds within 25 years. And then we have this, and that you're going to levy excess property taxes in order to repay those bonds. I would also call your attention to the reference to all as provided in the resolution number. We include that incorporation by reference, if you will, because our state Supreme Court has said that when voters approve a ballot such as this, that references we have the word limits that prevent us from doing that. So that's the formulation. It's also important to note a difference in a bond issue as opposed to the levy. The EPO levy that you did previously has estimated levy rates and levy collection amounts. And that's a different formulation than what a bond issue has. And that's because state law is different with respect to each of those types of ballots. So any questions on, I know that's a lot of information, but certainly want to open it up if you have any questions on either the ballot or kind of what we're trying to accomplish.
Not seeing any questions here, Jim.
Great. Okay, perfect. The rest of the provisions in the resolution are fairly straightforward in the sense that Section 10 authorizes the resolution to be delivered to the auditor, which would include auditors of Grant and Franklin County as well. And then also Section 11 identifies that you'll receive notice, identifies who's going to be receiving that notice specifically of the ballot. What will happen is once the board adopts the resolution, once the resolution is filed with the county will then turn around and prepare ballot proofs, and those proofs then will be sent to the district, and that is the notice requirement that is necessary under state law in order to make sure that there's no changes or mistakes made when the counties formulate the actual ballot proofs. Section 12 identifies and authorizes you to participate in the state guarantee program. Your prior outstanding bonds actually are all guaranteed by the state of Washington. This allows you to participate in their state guarantee program, and it's a great deal. You in essence are having the state of Washington act as bond insurance on your bonds, and it has meant that you obtain the state's credit rating with respect to your bonds. Section 13 authorizes the execution of the resolution and authorizes it to be done in electronic format. Given our COVID, sometimes some of the board members are remote, and this allows you to utilize electronic signatures. Section 14 is the severability provision. And then Section 15 is the effective date of the resolution with the signature lines. And then there's a certification page that certifies to the authenticity of the resolution once it's been approved. So with that, that is the bond election resolution for the February 8th ballot. Happy to take or entertain any kind of questions you might have.
It looks like we're good here on this end, Jim. We did notice in Section 12, I think it was Section 12, there was a phone number listed for your group, and there just seems to be a number missing there.
Oh, yeah.
Or Section
that's
11.
A great catch.
Section 11.
Yeah, great catch. I'll add my extra 7 to that. That's good. Great. Well, if any other questions come up, don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to respond.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Thank you for the help today.
Appreciate it, Jim.
You
Thank you.
bet. You bet. Thanks, everybody. Pete, would you like me to stay on, or are you?
No, you're welcome to, but I think we're just going to wrap up here and close the meeting. So thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, you too, Jim. So is there any other questions for Pete? I mean, that pro-con thing, I had a question on that, but he's kind of already addressed that.
I thought we were going to get a little bit of instruction on what we can say, what we can't say. Is that meeting happening later today, or was that this meeting?
This was information just about how do we do the technical pieces to get it onto the ballot.
Perfect.
How do we make sure that everything is handled that way? How do we address the new pro-con committee? After that, once we get it approved and we say, yep, the board adopted a formal resolution, we're running something, then it'll come about, here's what's appropriate to say, here's what the expectations are. So that's absolutely coming.
Okay, cool.
All right, not seeing any other questions. Our business is concluded. The meeting